Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Nick Kanoki, Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm very excited to have Lindsay Ziegler, President of the Andrew James Advisory Group and more, here with us today, to talk about, among other things, an A55K upcoming course, and we'll get to that in a moment. We just want to thank our patron members and especially our platinum member, Onuma System, Definitive Logic, now a Mantech company, ABS Quality Evaluation, CGI, and Jacobs, as well as all our ALN organizational members. We are very grateful for your continued support of this and other programming. And if you're out there thinking you would like to work with us, we would love to talk to you, so please reach out. And now, more information about the upcoming course. It is November 6th to 17th. It will be a web course discussing ISO 55000 asset management standard, and we will talk a bunch more about it today with Lindsay Ziegler. And so with that, Mike Bordenaro, Executive Director, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, Nick, and thanks for calling out that Mantech is now owner of Definitive Logic, and today we just got news that Mentor APM has received venture capital money from Emerald Technologies in Switzerland. So it's very interesting that our member organizations are being seen as valuable assets in themselves. And I think that says something powerful about the types of companies that are attracted to this. So thank you, Nick, for this. And Lindsay, thank you for your work at Andrew James Advisory Group, which has set up the A55K, ALN A55K training program that leads to ALN A55K Professional Certification. And we're so happy to have you to talk about that, but also thank you for stepping up in the asset management industry itself. Lindsay is now the chair of the U.S. Technical Advisory Group to the ISO 251 technical committee that develops the asset management standards. So we're going to be talking about that also. But first, we're going to talk about the A55K training program, which both Nick and I have been through. Welcome, Lindsay. How are you doing?
You're on mute, Lindsay.
Sorry about that. I'm doing very well, Mike. Thank you for asking.
How's the weather in Atlanta? You've been dodging hurricanes?
No, they're pretty much staying east of us, but it's so much cooler than it was 2 weeks ago.
Well, good
I mean,
for that.
2 weeks ago we were running up around 100, and now upper 70s. I love it.
That's lovely. So I actually love the A55K training program that you've set up. I liked ISO 55000 and specifically ISO 55000 when I just read it on my own, but going through the course really drove home the points and how the program, the educational program, is set up to teach you about all of the standards. Can you give us a little overview of the program?
Sure. And may I share my screen?
Please.
Okay, let me find the thing I want to share. There it is. Okay, so this is an interesting picture from heaven knows where. I like quote, an organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action rapidly is the ultimate competitive advantage. And that's from Jack Welch, who was one-time CEO of General Motors. So to start, if you're not familiar with ISO,
so that was a very interesting technical glitch. Lindsay,
yeah, I got kicked out.
Yeah.
And you made it back in. That's good.
So just rewind. Okay.
Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with ISO 55000, it is a set of standards for managing assets, and it specifically deals with management systems. So how do you set up a system to manage your assets? And you can see here on the slide, I'm not going to read the slides to you because I assume you can all read. It originally consisted of three pieces, a why piece, a what you need to do piece, and a how to do it piece. And that is now being expanded. So if you're looking to education on asset management, there's a couple of different directions you can go. You can either start with one that talks more about what we call the maintenance and engineering aspects of asset management. So dealing with individual assets and how do you set up maintenance schedules. ISO 55000 is not that. And the A55K training is not that. We're talking about things at a higher level conceptually than your maintenance and engineering. So we call it a top-down approach. Both have value depending on what your position is within your organization. But we like the top-down approach because we think it gives people a much more comprehensive view of how does maintenance and engineering fit within the greater organization. So as I just said, we talk about top-down, and when you train top-down and when you look at your asset management top-down, you can achieve some really meaningful organizational improvements. The biggest one, from my perspective, is you align your asset management objectives and your organizational objectives. That is huge in any organization. The ability to understand how what an asset manager is doing relates to the organizational goals and objectives, and the ability even more so to communicate that up the ladder, because I said for many years that in any position, no matter where you are in the organization, you also need to learn how to manage up. So you need to manage your manager, and you need to help your manager understand what you're doing and how it impacts what his objectives are.
Or her.
Or hers, yes, absolutely. And I say that as a longtime her. So our training is organized in the same order as the standards. So as we go through the 55,000, 55,001, 55,002, it should be very easy then for a student to go back to the actual standard and fill in any blanks, because we're not trying to teach you every single word in the standards. We only take 2 weeks. We don't have enough time to do that. But because we teach according to the structure of the standards, you can easily go back and find more detail within the standards themselves. So our training is primarily online, although we call it hybrid online. It lasts for 2 weeks. It combines computer-based lectures and exercises with live discussion sessions with the instructor and the other students. And I'm told by people who have taken the course that the live sessions are one of the most valuable parts of the course, because you get some cross-pollination between students. Particularly if you have students from different organizations, people share their experiences in different areas of expertise, and people get very excited about that. I've had cases where I've lost control of the conversation because people were having such a good conversation, and I'm not going to cut that off. That's ideal. That's what you want to happen. Now, beyond that, we can offer in-person classes. We shut them down in 2020 for obvious reasons. We are now able to offer in-person classes again. So if you have an organization that would like to have a class at your venue for just your people, you would need to contact us and we could work on arranging that. Students also benefit. Couple of things you can get. I believe there's 14 continuing professional education credits that you can get from the Project Management Institute. You get a certification, the A55K certification, and that connects you into a network of other certified professionals. And it also gives you the ability to market yourself as an A55K certified asset management professional. So for individuals, there are a lot of advantages too. So our November class, and unfortunately, Skype has decided to put a heading right on top of the words here, but our November class starts very shortly. Our registration ends September 30th. So we would encourage anyone who is interested to enroll. And then following that, we have a class in January, beginning at the end of January and running into the second week in February. And then there will be more. Sorry.
There'll be more classes throughout 2024?
Yes, I was just about to say that.
Okay.
This is the only one we have scheduled so far, but yeah, we're looking at more classes during the year.
So if you can stop sharing your screen, I'd like Nick to join us because he was involved in this. And I've got to echo what you said. Many people have commented on, in that the discussion is a big part of the learning part of it. Nick, did you experience that also?
Yeah, and for me, not coming from an asset management background, of course, it was pretty uniquely helpful. But what I was going to bring up too, Mike, was that even you, someone who had been aware of asset management before the standard, going through the course was super helpful. And it reminds me of last week's session with Christina Benti, just talking about the importance of practicing these things, even if they're not rocket science. It doesn't mean they will be easy to implement in your own life, in your own work, in your own organization. And so, Lindsay, I was just wondering if you could talk a little more about opportunities for practicing some of these things that ISO 55000 talks about within the course.
Well, one of the big areas of practice, of course, we have during the course, we have a lot of exercises where you're answering questions, you're having conversations, basically offline with your fellow students. But the big participation exercise is a team exercise to create a strategic asset management plan. And SAMP is a basic tenet of ISO 55000 compliance. You must have a strategic asset management plan if you're going to comply with the standard. And people have a tendency to look at that and think, oh my gosh, it needs to be this huge, massive, we used to say you measure its value by how much water it displaces in a bathroom fixture. And that's not what you want in a SAMP. So we assign teams. We have a case study that we have developed, and this one happens to be based on the assets that linear assets for a highway department, essentially. So,
very important topic these days.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, anybody who drives down a road full of potholes wishes that there were a strategic asset management plan for those linear assets. And we work with the students. The instructor works with the students, but the students work in a team, and we do that deliberately because in the real world, if you're going to develop a SAMP, you're going to do it in a team. You're not going to have one person go off and develop the SAMP. And you shouldn't. You need to have different minds thinking about it and coming up with solutions. We have gotten SAMPs that are basically in Excel, and that's fine. We got one that covered everything that needed to be covered in 3 pages. It was the most elegant thing I had ever seen in my life.
Excellent.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably the biggest exercise that we do is the SAMP exercise toward the end of the class. And then at the very end, we have a review session with a review exam. And following that, students can take the A55K certification exam. Now, one thing that I always warn the students about, we teach to the standard, we don't teach to the exam. And there's 2 reasons for that. I am a firm believer in not just teaching to a test. I don't like that. I don't think it's good education. And I don't actually know what's on the test because we have a theoretical Chinese wall between Andrew James and the ALN testing committee. And that was done deliberately so that, you know, it's really easy for an organization to create a class and to create a test that goes with the class and say, this is a certification exam, but are you really certifying or are you just teaching the exam?
Now,
So
we've had many people be scared about the exam, and
98%
really nothing,
pass rate.
it's not something to be afraid of. And
No.
people who don't pass are able to take the test again within 3 months, no extra charge, and they've always eventually gotten through to it. But I think the part that is really exciting is the SAMP, because you were talking about practicing, and Nick was talking about practicing, and that's what that exercise does. Can you tell us more about how you prepare people or guide people through the creation of the strategic asset management plan?
So first of all, we have a structure for the SAMP that parallels the structure of the standard. So you start out with what is probably the single most important question to answer, and that is, what is the scope of your strategic asset management plan? Because if you don't know what the bounds are of what you're trying to describe, then how do you describe it?
So the student can say, the street in front of my house, the highway that connects me to downtown, they can pick a linear asset that they want to theoretically work on.
They could theoretically do that, but remember, they're part of a team, and I suspect their teammates will say, you know, I'm pretty sure the scope of this needs to be the highway department's assets, because in the case study, we set up a situation where the mayor of this municipality is very unhappy with how these assets are managed. And he has some goals that he wants to be met by this asset management program. And so part of what the SAMP needs to do is to document how it's going to address the mayor's goals. But we go through section by section of the standard and talk about, here are the things you should be thinking about in your SAMP having to do with leadership, having to do with risk, having to do with, as I said, scope. So all of the various sections of the standard, we expect that you will consider those in your SAMP and that you will document those.
Lindsay, and I really appreciate the kind of objective first and taking into the context of the organization, et cetera. I really like starting from that point, because I think it could be challenging to work through an extensive standard if it felt like going through the motions. But when you put objectives at the outset and alignment of all the activities that you're doing on any level, wherever you are in the organization, to those objectives, I think it can really empower or motivate people to care a little bit about, this stuff that maybe could get lost because they're turning wrenches or because they're managing people and so I really appreciate that. And I think that's a great way to run the course.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell you a little story from my own experience. Way back many, many years ago, I was a computer programmer, and they came up with this wonderful new thing called top-down programming. And this is analogous to top-down programming. The first question is not, how do I get input? The first question is, what am I meant to accomplish? What is this supposed to do? And that's analogous to your, okay, what are the objectives that we want to meet? You start at the top. You start with, what's my goal? And then you can work to, and how am I going to get there?
Excellent. Well, I really like this, and what you're saying, Nick was saying, about someone who turns wrenches. This is for people who want to run an enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
If you're turning wrenches, unless you're looking to set up your own organization of wrench turners, this is not really for wrench turning. That's the leadership aspect.
Unless I will say, you find leaders at any level in an organization. So even among the wrench turners, there's going to be one or two guys who are really leaders. And taking the course can be valuable for them as well, because maybe they don't want to be a wrench turner for the rest of their life. Maybe they would like to be qualified to move up in the organization, and having that understanding of how turning wrenches fits into the overall organizational view can be very valuable.
Yeah. And for a leader who wants an organization to move in lockstep in an asset management system, then exposure to the system is good for everybody in the organization. That's for sure.
It is. It is.
Mike,
and
oh, sorry, Lindsay, go ahead.
You just wish that everybody in the organization understood how important managing your assets really is.
Well, and to that point, again, last week is still fresh on my mind, where Christina was talking about meeting with municipalities, having these sessions where they tried to bring in as many people as possible who were driving the plows, who had experience with the roads and the maintenance equipment, and helping them get the full picture and feel like upper management cared about their experience, and that their experience was a data point that was taken into account in decision making, and how much of an effect that had on their community, because they went home and talked to their families and changed the narrative and told the story of how important it is to manage your assets for the quality of life of the town.
Absolutely.
So I retract my statement. But I'm glad I made the wrong statement. It put us on the right course. And we can talk about that forever. But let's let Lindsay give us an overview of what's happening with the U.S. Technical Advisory Group.
Sure. Let me get back to my slideshow if I can find it. There it is. Okay, so a couple of months ago, I was elected as the incoming chair for the ISO TC 251, or Technical Committee 251, and that is the international group that is responsible for asset management in general and the 55,000 series of standards in particular. So the US has a group that is a subset of that. It's called a TAG, or a Technical Action Group. And we participate in the development of the standards, and we provide input into various standards. Many member countries also have tags and are actively participating in developing these standards. Now, there are currently 4 published standards. 55,000 is called Overview Principles and Terminology. That was published in 2014. 55,001 is Requirements. That was also published in 2014. 55,002 is Guidelines, and that was revised in 2018. And 55,002 is really, it's like an encyclopedia. It's a list of things to think about, or many lists of things to think about, and a lot of best practices and a lot of reference material. So that's an excellent piece of work there. And then in 2019, 55,010 was released, and that is Guidance of Aligning Financial and Non-Financial Functions. And that's still a huge topic for discussion, because at the end of the day, your finance folks' definition of an asset and the maintenance and engineering folks' definition of an asset is not the same. And so how do you align that, and how do you reconcile that difference? And that's part of what 55,010 is about. So over the last couple of years, TC 251 has been very, very, very busy, working on 6 different standards, all of which in the May meeting that the US TAG hosted in Philadelphia were advanced to the next stage of the process. So there's a revision of 55,000, of 55,001, and 55,010. Then we have new standards. 55,011 is Guidance for Development of Public Policy. And that is actually 55,010 is a technical standard rather than an international standard, but that's just a nit. 11 is Public Policy. 12 is People and Competence. And 13 is Asset Management Data. And that, of course, is increasingly huge as the world becomes more and more reliant on computers and automation. So all of those standards have been in process for the last couple of years. They should all be released in 2024. And in addition, the work group that I'm on, work group 6, was asked to look at 55,002 to see whether it should also be updated concurrently, because you try to keep the structure of all the standards parallel. Well, things changed in the 0 and the 01, so now 2 is not quite parallel with them. And I think what's probably going to happen based on the discussions that we've had as a work group is we will recommend that 02 be revised once 00 and 01 are released. And that should be before mid-year. And then we will hopefully get in a position to start looking at 02. Meanwhile, what we are doing is just doing a very high-level review of what does good look like in a revised version of 55,002. So that's what's going on with TC 251. So there's a lot of new stuff coming down the pike.
Excellent. And thank you for these slides. This is the most comprehensive understanding of what's happening with asset management ISO in one slide. So thank you. But if you could stop sharing the slide now, and let's just talk about what this all means. So when I first read the documents, I wasn't too interested in the 00 document and the 02 document. But through your class, I saw that the fundamentals are aligned with my own personal fundamentals. And that was really good to understand about the 00 document. And that the 02 document provides examples of how to address the to-do list of ISO 55001. That was really beneficial. And how do these other documents coming together support asset management?
So they all deal with specific areas of asset management that aren't dealt with within the three main standards. And they go into more depth. So the first one, the financial versus non-financial, that's been a question since 2014 when the standards were first promulgated. And it's a question that we address every time that we have a class. We talk about the difference between an asset management definition of an asset and a financial definition of an asset. And I'll give you a real quick example. In the US, in particular, financial reporting is done using something called US GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. And that defines how your organization is taxed. And in US GAAP, when you acquire an asset, you give it a value, and then over a period of time, you depreciate that value until it's written off, and on the books, it has no value. But if you are, for example, running a mining operation and you have a piece of mining equipment that cost $1 million to purchase, under US GAAP, they're writing off $100,000 a year on this asset. And at 10 years in the books, it has no value. But you're still running it because you have maintained it properly. So it has value to the organization, just not on paper. So there's a whole conversation about how do you reconcile that, and that was the purpose of that technical standard, is trying to communicate, okay, how can we reconcile that? Now, I will say that outside of the US, where the reporting standard is IFRS, which is the International Financial Reporting Standard, assets of that nature, durable assets, are marked to market rather than just depreciated. So if that $1 million piece of equipment 5 years down the road is still worth $750,000, then it'll show $750,000 in your financials. Whereas in the US, it'll show 500, and it will continue to decline very quickly over time. So that's the purpose of that one. And then, you know, the public policy one, there's been a question, an ongoing question: how do we raise the visibility of the importance of properly managing your assets and having a system for managing your assets? And one way is in countries where it's a requirement, where there has been either legislation or some sort of edict saying you will use proper asset management and you will use ISO 55000, hopefully. Colombia, for example, a few years ago started requiring all of their water utilities to use ISO 55000. There are other countries where there is some push to increase the use of a standard. And of course, we like ISO 55000, but if you aren't willing to sign up to that standard, we still would like you to use something to govern how you manage your assets.
Please. So thank you for that explanation, Lindsay. Went a little bit over. I hope people don't mind. Apparently not. We have had great interest in this topic. People from all over the world, in addition to South Africa, Germany and England are represented too. So if anybody's interested in talking about how this course can be incorporated into their company, or their educational institution, we're very open to talking about that.
And I would like to make one final point. Yes, we have new standards coming out sometime within the next 9 months or so. Don't let that deter you from taking the course, because 90% of the material is going to be the same anyway. And we are already in the process of putting together plans to create an update for people who have the course, who have taken the course, so that we can walk them through what has changed.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for that. Oh, so Mark Knight mentions the Institute of Asset Management standard subjects are changing. So we look forward to that. Mark, you just put yourself on ALN Thursday at 3 when that comes out. You'll have to explain that to us. And
I think that's a great idea. Thank you, Mark.
And thank you, Lindsay. Nick, you want to take us home?
Yeah, of course. Thanks again, Lindsay, for both presenting that slideshow and also just talking to us. A little nostalgia of a good class and how powerful it is to talk to people about these important things that often we don't talk about. So again, thank you to our ALN Platinum organizational member Onuma System and patrons Definitive Logic, ABS, CGI, and Jacobs. And thank you to all our organizational members. We really appreciate your continued support, especially the Andrew James Advisory Group and others that we've worked with recently. And really reach out if you want to figure out how you can work with us, because we love partnering with other organizations. And again, we've been talking about an upcoming course in November, the A55K course, and we check it out. Go to the Andrew James Advisory Group website. Or the ALN website should have a link as well. And we have some other events upcoming, but we'll have more information on that soon.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.